Season 1, Episode 5, Theme, with guest author Amey Ziegler.
Okay, we are really excited to have Amey Ziegler here with us today. Amey is an award-winning author of romantic comedies and mysteries. Her mainstream romance, The Casserole Dish, won the runner-up in the Rhone for sweet contemporary romance. Her 10 years of theater training in college and high school inspired her to narrate her own books. She spins stories with humor, charm, and heart, often with a dash of action and adventure. When she's not writing, she's teasing her 3 kids, globetrotting with her husband for book research, of course, or trying new things. You can find her at amyziegler.com or on Instagram and Twitter. We are so excited to have you here, Amey. This is going to be really fun.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for the invite. And I'm excited to share, what little I know with you guys and your audience. So I'm excited.
That's really awesome.
So we'll just jump right in with the first question then.
All right.
Why do you think theme is important in your writing?
Oh my gosh. So I think it was John Truby. I was taking a class by John Truby, and he basically said that the author's purpose is often to tell the world or their audience how to live a good life, or to answer the question of what makes a good life. If you see, people writing all sorts of stuff like genre fiction, particularly in literary fiction, but even in genre fiction, the types of ideals that we espouse are going to come through in what we say are good actions and good relationships, good desires, and all of those things. And those things come out in our themes. If you had a theme that was how to have good and successful relationships, or what is a good and successful relationship, and you're reading Pride and Prejudice, Jane Austen gives you a whole, treatise on what makes a good relationship, right? She puts up Darcy and Elizabeth and Jane and Mr. Bingley as really great relationships. And she looks at her parents and say, hey, that's maybe not the best relationship. And definitely when you look at Mr. Wickham and Lydia, you go, those guys are nuts. Those guys are crazy. That is not a good relationship. So being purposeful about your theme and thinking about your theme and what it is that you're trying to say can also help you craft better characters, better stories, and actually just kind of hone what it is that you're trying to say. Sometimes I don't know until I write the first draft and I was like, oh, this is the point of my story. So
yeah, all of that was so good.
Thanks.
So what advice would you give to writers about finding the theme of their book? Because I feel like a lot of times, while our writing does show our values in it and what we believe in the themes, we don't necessarily always start out thinking about that as the first thing. Sometimes, and a lot of people will come up with the world or the characters first. So how do you go about finding the theme?
Right. Absolutely. So I actually do start with a character. I don't sit here and ponder great themes, although I have things that I want my characters to say, just because somebody will say something and I'm like, oh, I think that's a lovely little nugget of wisdom. I want my character to be able to embody that. So for example, thinking of a character, some people come up with stories in all different ways. Some people just say, oh, I want to talk about, dragons and what can I do with dragons? That's fine. That's great. But when I come down to creating my characters, who is going to be in my cast of characters, who is going to be acting out, all these scenes, I at first ask myself 2 really important questions. And if you are a writer, this is what I would suggest that you start with. What does my character want? And then the next question, and that's a follow-up question, is why? One of my favorite books that just totally helped me understand this concept was actually Deborah Dixon's Goal, Motivation, and Conflict. And I always knew that you needed a motivation. I knew that you needed a goal. I knew that all of these things, but it was the why part that really stuck with me. Yes, I know they want something, but why? Why is that so important to them? And it is that exact thing, that why, that motivation is what informs all of the decisions that your characters are going to make in this book. If they are afraid of something, they are going to act out of fear. If they want something, they're going to act toward what they want. So the one thing that I think is really interesting is that the hero and the villain can actually have the same goal in the book, right? let's just give a fake, scenario here. Let's say both the villain and the hero want to marry the princess, okay? Or let's say it's, Mr. Wickham and Darcy. They both want to marry Elizabeth, right? You can both have them want the same thing, but you must show the reason why they want it and their differing methods of getting it, right? So the villain, somebody told me the difference between the hero and the villain is that the villain will sacrifice everything. He will sacrifice he will sacrifice the world to get what he loves. And the hero sacrifices what he loves to save the world, right? It's a very selfless type of a love. And so knowing, that the hero is marrying the princess because he loves her instead of the villain marrying the princess because he wants her power, right? He wants to be the next king, so he's marrying the princess. You can have the same goal, but the motivation is what sets those two goals apart, right? And then, of course, the means that they use to get that goal. So I always find that really interesting. So, for example, one of the things you can do, I love some classic literature. Sorry, a lot of the references I use are classic literature. I just find that a lot of people have read some of these things. It's not because I don't like anything written in the last little bit. I just feel like I'm going to reference a lot of things that are pretty well known. They've been made into movies. Some of them are, old, but I'm going to use them just because a lot of people have read the same books. Okay. Because I don't want you to be like, these are all dead book guys. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I have read stuff. But I feel like these illustrate a lot of the themes. So one of the things I want to talk about is the Lord of the Rings, right? There's a lot of possible themes for the Lord of the Rings. And what we do with those themes is we kind of show those, you prove the theme. That's the word I'd like to use, is prove the theme. So you have both the villain proving the theme. In other words, if your theme, like you get done writing your book and you're like, wow, this is really a story about loyalty and brotherhood. And I really, really, really want, say, Samwise Gamgee to really embody that concept of loyalty. I never, ever, ever want to state, and Samwise is loyal. You just show him repeatedly over and over and over again, putting loyalty above his own comfort, above his own desires, above all of these things, right? But then you show the villain and you kind of show the opposite of that, right? You show how the villains will risk everything and they don't really care much about loyalty or anything else. They just want what they want and they're willing to sacrifice a lot of these things. One of the themes for, like, say, The Princess Bride is like, don't take life too seriously, right? Like the whole tone of the book, all the characters, they're just silly, larger than life. And there's probably a bazillion themes in both of those works that we can talk about. And actually, if you listen to the villain one, I've got another one for The Lord of the Rings when we get to that one. I know, I love it. So when we see the villain try time and time again to use the wrong method to get there, yet we always see the protagonist using the right method and he may make mistakes, then that's proving the theme, because we're basically saying these are the wrong methods here. These are the right methods to get here, right? Like you see Gollum versus Sam, and Gollum only cares about one thing, right? He has greed in his heart. He wants that ring. He used deviousness and trickery to, and false friendship to try to get that ring from Frodo. But Sam is just like constantly loyal. And you love Sam for that, because of that, right?
Because of his sincerity.
So it's in sincerity, right? And we love seeing characters like that. So I usually teach a class like on foils. And if you don't know what a foil is basically contrasting characters. And how this can help you is the contrast is what helps us to know, what helps us define the character. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple of examples of how this works because I think it's kind of confusing and like I'm probably not explaining it very well, but I will give you examples and hopefully that will clarify. Okay, hopefully you've read Anne of Green Gables or at least watched the movies. They have a Netflix series on it, Anne with an E. But we love the character Anne. Why do we love her? Because she's curious, she's adventurous, she has an imagination, and she gets into a lot of scrapes. She is not somebody that is refined and beautiful, but the reason we know that is because of her friend Diana Barry. Diana Barry is everything that a young woman of that age should be. She's raven-haired. She has dimples on her elbows. She wears the white muslin dress and she never gets anything on it. She's a little lady, right? Her mom has trained her to be, marriageable and respectful and to be a good hostess, right? And Anne is none of those things. Anne was rejected by everybody who loved her. She was an orphan. She worked, and like the only place that she found love was with Marilla and Matthew, like these old, unmarried brother and sister couple that adopt her. And so in order to see how strange Anne is, you have to contrast her with somebody who is quote unquote normal, right? That is Diana Barry. So it doesn't always have to be the villain that kind of shows your character. But what I like to do is if I have somebody like Anne, I want to be, I want her to be absolutely crazy. I want her to be larger than life. She gets into a lot of scrapes. Then I have to show somebody who's normal so that you know what is normal in that life, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does.
Yeah. So a lot of times in rom-coms, the main character is the normal one. And then I don't know if you've noticed this, but almost always they have the wacky best friend. Have you noticed that?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, they do.
Yep.
Yeah. And the wacky best friend has like colored hair. She dresses colorfully. She's more daring. She's more of everything. Right. And this is to help the reader or the movie person who's watching the movie say, oh, well, I'm not like the crazy person over here. I'm definitely like this person. And it helps them relate more to that character because they're like, oh, this is what normal is. I want to be the normal person. That's me. So I think that's kind of fun that they have those foils in particularly rom-coms. They do it even when they do like bromances and stuff like that. They'll have like the wing guy or, the wing girl.
Yeah, it kind of balances. So I have a question, Amey.
Yeah, absolutely. Go.
Kind of going along with this train. So when you're building a character, and this is, I feel like a loaded question, but how do you match the theme? Like, how do you discover their theme?
What the theme is? Okay, so I've started writing now a little bit. I have 11 or so books published, and I've been writing since, I don't know, like for 14 years or something, pretty much full time. So now I do kind of start with a theme. Like I say, okay, here is kind of what I want to talk about. And then I take those characters and I say, hey, I want somebody who is brave, loyal, and kind, right? And so I embody those. And I think J.K. Rowling did this really well. Like, I feel like she took those four, like, Ravenclaw is smart, intelligent, and Hufflepuff, they are, loyal. Yeah,
and
loyalty and kind. And then you have somebody who's brave, and then you have people who are ambitious. And she kind of made character archetypes for that. And I love that. She was brilliant doing that. Like, you take Harry Potter, right? Here's Harry Potter. He's very brave. And the reason you know that is because you have, say, some Hufflepuffs in there who aren't quite as brave, right? They may be loyal, but maybe not as brave. But you also have Malfoy in there, he acts all big and tough, but he's really a chicken inside, right? Like, you can tell that the people around them are brave by contrasting with that. So I will take a character like that and I say, okay, what is their quality? Like, what is their, what qualities do they embody? So then I kind of say, okay, what stands out? What is going to be their defining character feature? I think would be how I do that. We'll just abbreviate that. The defining character feature is DFCF, right? We'll just call it that. Just kidding. I have no idea how to write that down. I would never be able to I can't remember acronyms to save my life. But you take that defining character and then you say, all right, what kind of flaws go along with that? And one of my favorite books, if you have not heard of, and if you have not talked about this at all, is two of them actually. And I hope that you guys have read these. I'm sure that your audience have heard of these before. My two favorite books that talk about characters and getting down to the nitty gritty of like, what are they going to embody and what are their flaws going to be, is Lisa Cron's Story Genius and Save the Cat Writes a Novel. Please tell me you've heard those. Yeah.
Yes.
I got to put a plug. Story
Yes.
Genius has been my Bible for the last 2 weeks. Like,
Yeah, she's been studying it religiously. And
religiously.
Absolutely. Like I have sticky notes on the inside with like notes on top of it because it's too much for the margins. I have it underlined and color coded and I actually sit. So I have, like I told you, like this incubation period where I'm thinking of the DFCF, the defining character formation or whatever. I don't remember what I called it, but I take those two books because in those books, one of the books, Save the Cat by Jessica Brody, writes a novel. Save the Cat writes a novel. She has like 3 things that every character needs: a need, a want, and a problem.
Yeah.
And I sit there and I stew over this. And because one of the thing is that you need is a life lesson that person needs to learn. And that to me is the theme. That is what I'm going to harp on. Like if he needs to learn that family needs to be more important than work, then I am constantly going to make that a flaw that he has, that he is constantly choosing work over family. And we see the negative consequences time and time again. Right. And then by that midpoint, he starts to say, you know what? Maybe I'm doing this all wrong. Maybe I'm doing this backwards. Maybe family is more important. But then he's tempted and he falls back into bad habits. And by the end of the story, the repetitions of these choices that your character is making will embody the theme. Whether you do it consciously or subconsciously, that is going to be your theme, because repetition of anything is like a motif, a theme, whatever a lot of people call it different things. But it's got to be these actions in your novel that are on repeat. And so as I get to the end of the book, it never says, and thus, dear reader, we know that by this character's decisions, we know that that work is secondary to family, that we should prioritize family. You don't ever say that, but you kind of do, right? You illustrate it without having to say it, right? We always say show, don't tell. And so we show the theme in action through the characters' acts and the choices that they make. Okay, yeah. That was a really long explanation.
I love that. Do you mind if I interject with a question here?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I've also heard that like you don't outright like explicitly state, like you were saying, the theme of my book is this. But I've also heard when you're showing and not telling that sometimes you even have like a side character question the character's motives as they're still trying to like learn that. How would you implement that advice?
So I actually have something to tell you from so I got my bachelor's degree in communication, and this sounds like a tangent, but I promise I'll bring it back. In there, I took one of the most amazing classes. Like I loved my degree in communication. I went to the U of A. They talked about all sorts of crazy stuff, relationships, like triangulation, social justification theory, like all of these wonderful things. But I think one of the most valuable things that I got out of there is something called the inoculation theory. And basically it's how you persuade your audience. Okay. I learned it in my persuasion class. And a lot of the people that were doing communication, they ended up going on to be lawyers. I, in fact, wrote fiction. Voila. So
I love it.
So in this persuasion technique, what it is you bring up a weak argument. You bring up the argument, right? You bring up the argument, you like say something, and then you bring up, then you question the argument, and then you bring up a greater response to that. So for example, you could say something like, family isn't that important. It is, okay, so that's the statement, right? Or family is important, right? That's your statement of, that's your theme. That's what you want to show in your book. You have someone say, yes, but family can be inconvenient. Family can be hard to live with. family can be abusive. Family can be all of these things, right? And you have them have like a weak argument against your theme, right? And then you come back and you show a greater argument for that. And you say, notwithstanding all of these things, right? Blood is still thicker than water. Family can be found. Family loyalty is greater than, political machinations. You can come back with any argument that is stronger than that will blow that out of the water, and it will be wildly persuasive. They used to do this with, they use it mostly in advertising, but I think we can use this in writing as well. Like,
absolutely.
Right? So I use that, and I teach my kids a lot of things. That's how I teach my kids to stay away from drugs. I'll be like, there'll be people out there that'll tell you that drugs are fun, and all this other stuff. But it's like, but we know that drugs really make you cracked out and like a crackhead, and like, and you show examples of people who are just totally out there doing drugs, and you're like, that's what really it looks like. Drugs are not cool. They actually do this, right? And it's very powerful, and it's called the inoculation theory because it is giving like a little bit of of something, and then you totally like come back with a stronger argument. So I would say use that. Use something like that if you want to question.
Yeah.
Your theme, which you should.
Yeah.
I think you should challenge your theme. I think that's a lot of fun.
Always. Yeah. That's fantastic. That's awesome.
You're blowing my mind over here, Amey.
It's so sad because this is what I think about all day. I really shouldn't. I should have a life, really. But yeah, this is the kind of stuff that I think about as a writer. Right?
Hey, it's great. Yeah. So do you have any other advice on theme you'd like to give our audience before we wrap up?
Let me check and see. You know what? I think I've just about covered everything that I wanted to talk about. There's some other things that kind of blend in. I'm going to do another podcast a little bit later on villains, and I will finish up kind of talking about the how you can use kind of theme and how to develop a really awesome villain. And I have some website resources for that. So if you want to click on the villain link when that comes up, that would be awesome, because I've got more to say about that. So I think we can leave it there and just go on to the villain. So
awesome. We do, Amey, like to have our guests leave a challenge with each of their episodes for our audience. So what would you like to challenge them with on theme?
Ooh. Okay, I think a good challenge. So this is my challenge for your readers today. Okay, Amey and Megan. I think that as you are working on your work in progress, I want you to look over your manuscript, your current work in progress, and I want you to see if you can see some repetitions of actions. And I want you to look and see, what is it that I am trying to say? And look and see if there are some themes that are coming out in your work. Also, I want to challenge you that the next time you start incubating your next work in progress, I want you to be thoughtful about what it is you're trying to say and try to come up with a theme beforehand and see if that helps you create those characters that can embody that theme, can prove the theme and challenge the theme, and see if that helps writing any smoother. And then come back and tell me about it. Like, reach out to me on Twitter or Instagram or any of the, I'm all over in social media. Come out and tell me if this works for you, and let me know, like, if this was helpful at all. I'd love to know. Like, I love people, so reach out to me.
Awesome. That's great. I love it. Yeah, everybody, Amey is really awesome. So reach out to her.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. And thank you guys again, like, so much. Thanks for having me. This has been so much fun. I really love it. And you guys are great hostesses. So this is great.
No, and you had some amazing content. That was awesome. Thank you.
Oh, I love to teach, and I talk a lot. So love it.
Thank you for listening, because if you're drowning in words, so are we, and you might as well not do it alone.